The story begins with two beautiful sisters named Ginger and Bridget riding a horse through a forest during a harsh winter where snow already covers the ground. They reach a point where the horse becomes frightened, so they dismount and lead the horse. They see indigenous symbols hanging from the trees and then arrive at a cabin with a bloody mess inside. They find an elderly indigenous woman standing nearby. She tells them that their sister has been gone for many summers. She gives each of them a leather necklace with a crow skull attached. Even without understanding it, they put on the gifts. She tells a prophecy, but they do not comprehend it. The horse gets nervous and runs away, with Ginger and Bridget chasing after it. It escapes. Then Bridget steps into a bear trap, which closes on her leg. It is very strong, and Ginger cannot open it, so she goes to get help from the old woman. While her sister leaves, Bridget waits anxiously for her rescue. Back at the indigenous camp, Ginger hears a wolf howl and then runs back to Bridget, who is being stared down by a very fierce wolf. A young indigenous man named Hunter approaches and calls the wolf. As he gets closer to Bridget, Ginger runs and hits him with a piece of wood, but he throws a slingshot that wraps around Ginger, and she falls to the ground. Hunter bends down and opens the trap, and Bridget is able to pull her leg free. He puts some indigenous medicine on her wound. Then, he frees Ginger from the slingshot and calls his wolf. As he walks, he looks at Ginger and Bridget and whistles for them to follow. They follow him to a fort where a guard named Claude watches from above as they approach. The entrance doors are marked with crucifixes, deep scratches and blood, as if something fierce and terrible had tried to enter. A man named Cormac opens the gate, and they enter. As they walk inside, they see some tombs and other indigenous people. A man named James abuses Cormac for allowing the sisters in. Another man, known as Wallace Rollins, tells James to back off. Bridget shows Rollins the wound on her leg from the trap. Then a priest named Reverend Gilbert tells Rollins to expel them from the fort. A doctor named Murphy treats Bridget's wound. Rollins enters and introduces himself, inviting the sisters to join them for dinner in the company hall. Ginger asks Dr. Murphy what the people in the tombs died from, but he does not tell her. A young man named Finn takes them to their room. He says it was Jeffrey's room, Rollins' son, but he died. He gives them some clothes that belonged to Rollins' wife, who also died. At the dinner table, Reverend Gilbert says grace over the food, but Ginger interrupts with an amen, and they start to eat. Murphy says there isn't much food left. Hunter enters and puts the lower jaw of a wolf on the table. He joins them for dinner, but it seems that James doesn't think much of Hunter. James makes some accusations against Hunter, but Hunter puts a knife against James's throat and tells him he stays because he wishes to. Gilbert says they should abandon the fort, but Rollins says they will stay and hold the place. Suddenly, they hear a deep growl coming from the forests beyond. Ginger and Bridget walk to their room, and Gilbert follows them. He says there are demons outside, and they quickly shut the door behind them. As they lie in bed, Ginger has a vision of something evil. While Bridget is sleeping, she leaves the room to fetch water. She hears a sound and goes to investigate. She opens the door to a small room and finds a young boy huddled in a corner. As she approaches him, he turns to her with a grotesquely deformed face, and she screams as he bites her. It is early morning, and Ginger wakes Bridget, who sees that Ginger has been bitten on the shoulder. Young Ginger wants to leave. They find a sword and a bayonet and venture outside. They go to the main gate and remove the wood that locks the door. James appears and slaps Ginger, and she falls to the ground. He throws Bridget to the floor, but Ginger gets up ready to fight him. Before they can fight, Bridget points a rifle at his head. As they stand there, something tries to get through the doors. James calls for help, and other men come running. A man is attacked by the creature through the gate, and they barely manage to close the door while the girls escape. Gilbert tells them that a demon came through a hole in the wall and locks them in a nearby cabin, closing the door. What he actually did was lock them in with the creature. As the thing chases them upstairs, they lock themselves in a small room, and the creature tries to break down the door. Suddenly, the creature drops dead when Hunter shoots an arrow into its head from outside the door. As they come down, Rollins appears, and Ginger tells him that Gilbert locked them in with the demon. The tower guard tells Rollins that there are many of them outside the fort. Rollins orders the girls to return to their room. Hunter looks at Bridget and says something in Indigenous, then says, "Black and red." Bridget looks at Ginger and sees that her nose is bleeding. As they sit on the bed in their room, they hear the men shooting rifles at the beastly creatures outside the gates. Later, Ginger wakes up in bed to find Bridget missing. She leaves the room looking for her, but instead finds Hunter. He sees the wound on her shoulder and applies some indigenous medicine. Ginger leans forward and kisses him. As he kisses her shoulder, she has a vision of Bridget with a bloodied face. However, this seems to have just been a dream. Now we see Ginger lying in bed in a pool of blood next to Bridget. This is caused by her shoulder wound worsening. They go to Dr. Murphy's house, and on the way, they see the dead beast that attacked them earlier, something bizarre and terrifying. Upon arriving at the location, they find Finn inside cutting leeches, with red stains around his mouth. Murphy enters and sees Finn and asks if he was bitten the night before, but Finn denies it. As Murphy points his rifle at Finn, he tells him to put a leech on his chest. At the same time, Murphy cocks the rifle. The leech starts to grow rapidly, and as Finn screams, Murphy shoots him. He asks the girls how he can help them, but they are in shock from what they just witnessed. Considering what just happened, they decide it's best not to mention Ginger's shoulder bite. As Murphy and the girls leave the house, they see up close the body of the dead beast, which is the size of a man lying on the floor. Murphy tells a man named Seamus that once bitten, they transform. This creature was probably once Claude's brother, Jean-Pierre. Seamus takes one of the eyes, which is made of glass, so now they know for sure. The men discuss making a good decision for everyone, but Seamus wants to leave, but Roland says they have to stay and fight. The girls return to their room, and Ginger tells Bridget that Roland's son, who bit her, is transforming into one of those creatures, and so is she. Bridget does not want to believe it. Roland brings some food to his son, but it seems he has escaped. The scene changes, and we see Claude telling Ginger that if the creature that bit her is killed before the next full moon, there's no danger of becoming an aberration. Below, Gilbert is preaching about the new tombs. Ginger is feeling sick and delirious. Suddenly, Jeffrey is standing in the room talking to Ginger, but then he leaves as Bridget enters. He was just an apparition. In the center of the village, they throw the body of the dead creature onto a bonfire, and Claude places the head on a stake outside the gate as a warning to the other monsters. The moon is visible in the sky, almost full, and Bridget looks at Ginger's wound, which is healing, but also starting to grow some fur. In the kitchen, Roland tells Bridget that he knows Ginger let her son out of the room. He doesn't fight with her, he just hands back her necklace and leaves. Ginger is sleeping in the dark room when we see the young boy climbing into her bed. She wakes up and screams. Then Jeffrey runs and hides in the corner. Bridget enters and Jeffrey runs out. We see Seamus in his room when he hears a noise in the attic. Upon going up to see, Jeffrey jumps on him, and he falls to the ground on his back. Minutes later, the men are searching for Seamus, but they find him dead and face down in his house, with a piece of Ginger's hair nearby. Thinking the young girl is to blame, the men take Ginger outside, and James holds Bridget down on the bed. The indigenous boy named Milo watches and goes to fetch Rollins. Bridget bites James's hand, and he hits her. Rollins enters and orders James to leave the room at gunpoint. In the doctor's office, Gilbert, Claude, and Cormac have Ginger on the table while Murphy is about to put a leech on her. Rollins enters the room, and knowing the evil that Dr. Murphy will do, shoots him and orders the others to leave. Back in their room, Ginger says she needs to kill the boy to end the curse. She grabs a bayonet and locks Bridget in the room. Outside, Ginger sees James and Claude pushing Milo out of the gate. She finds Jeffrey at his mother's grave, holding the corpse's hand. She wants to kill the boy, but out of compassion, she cannot. Suddenly, Cormac shoots at Jeffrey but misses, and seizing the opportunity, both run away. Back in their room, Hunter tells Bridget that he dreamed of her and that he must protect her. He wants to take her away to save her, but she will not leave Ginger alone. Outside, the men have captured Jeffrey and call Rollins to see. Rollins tries to touch him, but Jeffrey runs to the well where Rollins shoots him, and he falls into the well. Ginger is distressed and tells Bridget that she couldn't kill him. Apparently, after everything seems all right, Ginger and Bridget leave the fort through a hole in the wall and walk into the forest, while the men retrieve Jeffrey's body. A little further ahead, the girls find Milo. He tries to lead them to Hunter's cave, but the beasts are following them, and the three separate. Bridget stumbles upon the dead body of Milo, who was attacked. Ginger approaches and tells Bridget that it was she who attacked Milo, showing that the curse may still exist within her. They back away and find Hunter's cave and enter. They find the old woman, but she says it's too late. Ginger should have killed the boy before he bit her. Hunter and his dog arrive and enter the cave. The old woman gives Bridget and Hunter a potion to drink so they can see what will happen. In a dream, Bridget wakes up lying in the snow outside with a knife in her hand. She finds the old woman dead with her throat cut. Now she is in the fort and sees a werewolf beast trapped in a snare. But when she looks again, she sees that it is Ginger caught in the trap. She sees Hunter about to kill Ginger. She rushes to stab Hunter, but realizes that she has actually stabbed Ginger in the chest, and Hunter disappears. Bridget wakes from the dream and finds the old woman dead with her throat torn. She finds Hunter, and he tells her that Ginger killed the old woman. He asks Bridget what she saw in her dream. In Hunter's vision, he sees his own death, where he will give his life to save Bridget, and tells her she must kill Ginger. They go to the fort to wait for Ginger. Once inside the fort, Hunter hands Bridget over to James. Hours later, it is night and Hunter is outside waiting, while we see Bridget's hands are tied, and she is in a small room. Gilbert enters and sits in front of her, offering her absolution, but she tells him she has seen what happens and curses him. He takes her out and throws her to the ground, calling her a witch. Ginger approaches the gate and knocks, and they let her in. Meanwhile, Gilbert is about to set fire to Bridget, but Hunter shoots an arrow into his arm, and he drops the flaming piece. When Ginger enters, James and Cormac start hitting her, but when she sits down, James kicks her down. Gilbert tells Rollins to burn Bridget, but instead, he stabs Gilbert with a sword and then sets him on fire. While Ginger crawls to the gates, James approaches her, mocking her weakness. But with a quick motion of her hand, she cuts his throat. She gets up and opens the gates, and all the werewolf creatures come in. Claude and Cormac try to run, but it's too late. Hunter prepares his arrows and shoots one of the beasts. When one of the beasts attacks Rollins, Hunter kills him. Rollins gets up with bite marks on his face. He grabs his knife and frees Bridget. Hunter kills another wolf with an axe, and then kills another with his knife. Inside the building, Rollins sets fire to everything. While Hunter shoots another wolf, one leaps and bites his arm, pulling him down as he stabs it. Walking upstairs, Rollins calmly sits, loads his gun, and blows his brains out. Outside, several dead creatures are lying everywhere, and Bridget, walking with two flaming torches, looks for her sister Ginger. She drops the torches as she walks toward Hunter. He gives her a knife and tells her she must kill Ginger. But Bridget looks at her sister and says, "Together forever," and then turns and stabs Hunter in the chest. Bridget runs to Ginger, and they embrace, then turn and leave the fort, locking the gates from the outside while the houses inside burn. In the end, we see Ginger sitting on the snowy ground with Bridget's head in her lap and blood dripping from her hand. Choosing her end, Bridget will soon become like her sister, not as beasts, but as something more powerful. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.